Hi, everyone. Welcome to Brooks River in Katmai National Park, Alaska. We're at the beginning of the salmon run. Bears are gathering at the river moment by moment, it seems like, and there's a lot of action to talk about today. During this play-by-play, it is July 2nd, 2026. My name is Mike Fitz with explore.org. Happy to be here again. This is my first play-by-play for the season, and we're also joined by my co-host today, Troy Hunt, who is at Brooks River this year. Troy, great to have you on the program, and I'm looking forward to hearing some about your on the ground perspective from the river.
Looking forward to the opportunity. It's happy to be here.
And Troy, we were talking earlier today, like hoping that there would be bears around because there have been times on the cameras recently where there weren't a lot of bears in sight. But we have four bears at Brooks Falls right now. So that's great. And we've been able to see some of these bears interacting earlier before the broadcast. Right now, they're kind of in a state of calm for the time being, but that could change, especially if this bear in the foreground decides to walk into the river. Now, we're going to get back to our live cams here in just a moment, but I know we're probably going to have new viewers joining us for this broadcast. So as always, in the beginning of our play-by-plays, let's introduce you to Brooks River and its location. We'll take a quick tour. We're headed to Katmai National Park in Alaska. Katmai is the fourth largest national park in the United States. And Brooks River is located in the west central portion of Katmai. It's about 300 miles southwest of Anchorage, Alaska. In this view, the river will flow from left to right, from Lake Brooks to Naknek Lake. Brooks Falls is located at about the river's halfway mark. And along with our webcam partner, the National Park Service, explore.org hosts and maintains several webcams at the river. The signal from those webcams is sent either to a direct satellite internet connection, or it is relayed off of a radio repeater on nearby Dumpling Mountain, and then sent to the park headquarters in the small town of King Salmon, about 30 miles away. So that's how the cameras get out to the rest of the world. Let's take a look at the cameras themselves. More specifically, up at Brooks Falls, our most popular webcam on explore.org is the Brooks Falls camera. That camera looks across the river and occasionally downstream too, depending on the activity. So that's the area outlined in yellow. We also have our Falls low cam in that location, which gives us a bear's eye perspective on the river. About 100 yards downstream is the Riffles camera, and the Riffles camera looks across the river and upstream towards the falls. At the river mouth, we have three cameras available to us today. We have the Riverwatch camera, which looks upstream from the bridge across probably the area that's most ecologically diverse in the Brooks River area. Lots of marshes, forests, oxbow meanders, main river channels, lots of bears and fish use that area too. And then we have our underwater camera, which is mounted to a piling on the bridge, not quite midway along the bridge over the river, maybe 2/3 of the way to the north side of that bridge. And it looks downstream, so out towards the lake itself. And then finally, we have Cat's River View, which is named in honor of our longtime lead camera operator, the late Catherine Green. That camera right now looks out towards the river mouth and Naknek Lake. Finally, we have Dumpling Mountain as well. Dumpling Mountain that camera is located a little less than 3 miles straight line distance from Brooks River. It's a little foggy up there today. Troy, it certainly looks like I don't know if I want to call it a dreary day there. It's hard for me to tell, but it certainly looks like not
It's
your brightest day.
certainly gray. It's certainly gray. I've not seen the sunshine yet today. It's been rainy over the last couple of days here, but the clouds are a little higher today than they were yesterday.
So I'll give you the choice, Troy, for which cam you want to go to next. This is live footage from Dumpling Mountain, but we have a few bears on different cameras, and I'm curious to know which one you think we should go to next.
I'm interested in what's happening at the Riffles right now. When we are so accustomed to seeing, the iconic images of the bears on the falls, but this guy is choosing a very different strategy, staying out of the middle of the fray, hoping that something will come downstream and be catchable. And while there's not a huge number of salmon in the river yet, it's not a bad choice in terms of reducing competition with the other bears that are up at the falls. What kind of, do you know what bear that is, perchance, Mike? Because I am not at all good at figuring this out yet.
Yeah, I think this is number 138. And if that identification is correct, he was first identified as like a 3 or 4 year old in 2020. So fast forward several years now, he's an adult bear growing into the prime of his life. And you're certainly right, Troy, that this can be a lucrative spot if you know where to fish. In fact, we've seen bears earlier today using the riffles area to catch salmon, and that deeper spot where this bear is sitting seems to be one of those locations where bears can maybe catch salmon more successfully. And also, it could be a less stressful place to fish because you have less competition typically for those fishing spots. And as more and more salmon arrive, Troy, we're going to see the bears sort of like filling in all of those different niches that they do near Brooks Falls. So competition for these fishing spots is probably only going to get more intense before it eases.
I imagine. Well, and they may be hopeful because last year was such a huge salmon run. They may be going, it was a smorgasbord last year. Where's all the fish?
Yeah, and it's
So,
it's it's fairly early in the salmon run too. Oh, I forgot to mention. This reminds me because we had a bunch of questions come in about salmon, but I forgot to mention if you want to submit questions in advance for any of our live programs, you can do that through what we call the Ask Your Bear Camp question form. It's just a Google form. We have it links to it on the Explore webpage. If you're watching on YouTube, for instance, just ask a moderator for the link to that. Thanks to everybody who submits their questions because I do read each and every one of them. Because yeah, people were wondering about salmon in particular. There was one question from Aaron who was wondering, where are the salmon this year? Is this a normal timing? Because last year was crazy already by this time. And yeah, I think, if you watched the camera last year at this time of the year, this was really when things started to pick up rapidly. In fact, I have a note that I made to myself from July 7, 2025. So a few days from now, but I wrote several days of immense salmon numbers in the river. All the bears appear well fed. We wouldn't say that about what we've been seeing on the river right now. The salmon are pretty much on time. In fact, for the overall Bristol Bay region, uh, the salmon run, from what has been caught at least, seems to be like kind of ahead of pace. But salmon sometimes can be delayed by ocean conditions coming into freshwater. If it's like a colder year, for example, maybe they delay their run into freshwater just a little bit. But it is a true bell curve, and what 138 here knows. Let me draw on the screen here. I'll draw a bell curve, right? What 138 knows is that this is going to be like the peak of the salmon, and it's happening. It's happening very soon. But where we are in this happens to be kind of like closer to this area of the curve. So we actually might be even on the lower end of things. So we're not at the peak of the salmon run quite yet in Bristol Bay. The vast majority of salmon, historically at least, in the last, uh, last 50, 60 years, maybe even going back further, Troy, like the vast majority of salmon, something like 80% of them come within the first 2 weeks of July. So it's like a wall of salmon moving through the ocean. And when you're walking across the bridge or something like that, or standing at the falls, are you able to see a lot of fish in the water? Occasionally, we're seeing some on the underwater camera, but we have seen some fish boils too here and there. But I don't think on the cameras we've seen a whole lot of fish.
when when you're out in the middle of the bridge, the channel has shifted a little bit from where the salmon camera is at. And so we're not seeing the number of fish that are actually there. They're kind of circling around. There's several thousand of them that I saw day before yesterday standing out there that just keep circling around, and people are down there trying to fish them, and they're largely ignoring the people who are out there with their fly rods and just hanging out. Occasionally, a very aggressive bear will come running through that territory in search of a quick meal, but the fish, of course, are very wily and good at escaping. But yeah, you can actually just see these dark trends swirling around and around. It's pretty amazing. And it happened quite quickly because we went from the day that the first salmon was caught by one of our rangers fishing after work, where we had seen only rainbow trout pretty much and some dolly varden and some other fish in the river too. Just suddenly they're showing up in hundreds and then thousands, and they're just hanging out down there. I mean, if we looked at the river view from the angle of those cameras, you can't see what is happening in that space, but looking straight down, it's pretty amazing to see them.
The fact that we don't see, bears sitting in the water on the Riverwatch camera or Cat's River View is a great example of how bears, again, are adaptable and intelligent, and they use the topography of the river to their advantage. So as 138 moves downstream, it looks like he's going to move out of our line of sight pretty quick. Maybe if we go to our falls low cam, we'll see how bears are looking, again, to take advantage of salmon when they're most vulnerable at this time of the year. So bears recognize vulnerability in prey. They recognize vulnerability in other bears if they're competing over a resource that they want, whether that's a fishing spot or like a mating opportunity. We have 801 on the far side, so he's kind of like downstream of the boulders. And then we have 903 on the lip of the falls. He likes to sit down on the lip and really hang his neck down low. And that's one of his tells. So if you see him in that spot, and a bear looking kind of Eeyore like, from Winnie the Pooh, that doesn't reflect his mood. That's just kind of, the pose that he strikes. It's probably 903 on the lip of the falls. And then one of the more dominant bears on the river right now, very close to the most dominant currently, is number 164, who's sitting on the bank there with his big blonde poofy ears, and he's growing quite a bit. And Troy, that one of the things that I love to watch about bears is how they fit themselves into these different niches at Brooks Falls, because you don't see 801 on the lip of the falls. Um, you will occasionally see 164 there, but they all have their preferred fishing spots, and sometimes they're forced into that, and sometimes it's a wide open choice that they have.
Well, I would imagine some of that probably comes from the training they had from their mothers, because if they model success from their parent who taught them how to fish, then it would make sense for them to repeat that behavior. But then there will have to be some other observational learning that's happening as they are cubs and subadults going, well, this particular bear is quite successful here. When they're not there, let me try that spot. I mean, we all
Yes,
have our
that
favorite restaurants, don't we?
yeah, that's something I would agree with completely too. Like, it depends on what mom exposed them to, what they were exposed to as young bears and watching other bears. In fact, the bear on the lip of the falls, let's go to Falls High. We'll get a better look at him. 903. He is believed to be a bear who was raised along Brooks River. A lot of people suspect that his mother is the famous 128. She is nicknamed Grazer. One of the more, when she has cubs, one of the more defensive bears on the river. Um, and she's a lip fisher, Troy. So she'll fish on the lip, and
Mhm.
and she brings her cubs to the lip, so they're exposed to that. If we go down to Falls Low, I have no idea if this is right, and I don't want the Bear Cam audience to be like, Mike said for sure that this is who 164's mother is. I don't want anyone to say that, but those ears on 164, who's often called Bucky in the foreground here, boy, those are Grazer like. And I don't know if we've accounted for all of Grazer's offspring from her 2016 litter. And if so, that would, I don't know, it kind of matches up. But again, that is a wild hypothesis. It's unsupported by really any real data. We would need genetic analysis to know that for sure. But anyway, yeah, the bears certainly learn by watching their moms.
Yeah. Keeps looking over his shoulder repeatedly. I wonder what's happening upstream that we can't see because the camera view is blocked by trees. Because they would have to be on guard even though they are focused on fishing, because at any point in time they could end up with competition for that spot if somebody else thinks they should have it.
It is a split focus that they need to maintain, and it's almost like a triple focus if you're a mom trying to protect cubs, because you got to worry about your cubs, you got to worry about your position, um, you got to worry about fishing and catching food too. So these males up at the falls, and all three of these are adult males here, they are really just kind of focused on their own welfare. 903 there, Troy, yeah, as you were saying, kind of looking over his right shoulder, trying to ensure that no one is going to sneak up behind him, and that takes his attention away from the water below just for a split second. Sometimes bears miss those opportunities to catch a fish. If that's the second when a salmon happens to jump, it's going to be harder for, of course, for 903 to catch that fish. Right now, things are in this equilibrium or a stasis. I bet if we see 164 move into the water, we'll see all of these other bears that are in our view currently decide, hey, to pay attention to him rather than to pay attention to fishing.
Well, the competition that exists between them for resources, even as rich as the resources are in Brooks River when the salmon are running, is still great. Oh, big yawn. I love it. Those male bears are generally very solitary and defending their territory, even though in this region they wander over a 35 to 50-mile range. They're fish jumping. They're still waiting for the opportunity to defend themselves if necessary with that overlapping range. So it's interesting the state of uneasy detente that happens here at the river just so that they can communally fish and briefly get along with each other, although they don't always get along. We've seen some competition happen on the cameras this summer so far where some bears are fighting over a fish or just trying to push someone out of the way.
Yes, and I think we can expect to see more of that, even if we get like a really big pulse of salmon coming into the river any moment. Like if there's a wave of salmon and all of a sudden there's like dozens of fish jumping, there's probably going to be bears trying to steal fish from other bears just because they're all so hungry right now. And something
Mhm.
and some for some bears stealing is easier than making your own catch. Um, I maybe we'll check out Falls High. Go to that main camera for Brooks Falls because I think we're getting a look at 801 here. And he's an adult male. What do my notes say about when he was first
Yeah, he's
identified? There's
got
so many bears along the river that I have to refer to my notes all the time. But yeah, he was first identified in 2017 as a young adult male. So fast forward 9 years, he's full grown adult now. Uh, Troy, he's one of those bears that can be fairly recognizable, but I know that, we were talking before the program, you're like, oh, I'm still trying to figure out many of these bears. I think your perspective actually might help some of our new bear cam viewers. If you were looking at this bear and trying to remember him for the future, is there like distinctive field marks that stand out to you?
Absolutely. That the tip of his snout is very, very dark and doesn't look like it has much fur on it. And then he's got that really blonde ridge right below his eyes, which seems fairly distinct to me. And then it looks like he doesn't have them, but it looks like he's got some porcupine quills sticking up out of his head just there by his left ear. The other thing I'm noticing about him right now is he's got that nice gash on his left side back by his left rear leg. Looks like he's been in a bit of a fracas with somebody. The
Yes,
ears
and
are
that,
kind of downturned, different than the bear that's sitting on the lip that has those kind of real teddy bear ears. These are more down to the side and a little flatter, and that may just be positioning because he's listening, but they look a little lower.
and I think that wound actually might be fresh. It might be from the last hour because 164
Mhm.
kind of jumped him from behind maybe about an hour ago uh, at in that spot where he's standing right now, and you can see him really paying attention to the near side, the camera side of the river, and I think that's because 164 moved into the jacuzzi. But all of those field marks that you talked about, Troy, I think, and that yawn indication of stress there, he's just a little weirded out, maybe by the proximity of when 164 has moved into the jacuzzi. But all those field marks, Troy, yeah, I think those are great to look at. He also has, I think, fairly wide set eyes. He almost has like a pouty look to his face. And again, that's not a reflection of his mood. That is just kind of like, how we think eagles are proud, for instance, because of their brow ridge. They're not proud. That's
Hmm.
just, kind of like what we anthropomorphize them to look like. So he has that little pouty face to me, and that's one of the ways that I uh, identify 801.
And the fishing doesn't look like it's very good right now because they're doing a whole lot of looking and not a lot of eating.
Yeah, not great fishing conditions right now just because of a lack of salmon. All of these bears are very skilled at catching fish. If you're
There
on the
has to
lip of
be a
the
fish to
falls,
catch.
yeah, right. Yeah, there's got to be a fish to catch. So, like, I think maybe 903 here is in probably the worst spot under these conditions because if a fish isn't jumping, he's not going to catch. But there could very well be fish swirling in these like plunge pools and rapids right below the falls. So 801 on the far side, 164 on the near side in the jacuzzi. He might actually be doing. Um, they might be doing themselves a favor if fish are still there. That is.
Mm. The thing to notice, the one bear, sorry, the numbers are just still a mystery to me, is walking away. And the moment he moved, we watched the other two look at him and assess the risk and say nope and went back to fishing. It was very quick, that assessment that they made, but they caught the movement and wanted to make sure that there was not going to be further risk of violence.
Yeah, they're very aware of who's who, and especially when they're in close proximity like this. Along on the larger landscape, they're communicating who's been where and how old they are and how healthy they feel, what sex they are by scent marking, urine trails, for instance, scat piles, um, marking trees, things of that nature. But at Brooks Falls, I'm sure there's the scent is playing a big role, but they're also just eyeballing each other, knowing who's who. And Troy, yeah, you can see, how careful 903 on the lip is moving away from
Mhm.
164.
Even though it would be quite an aggressive move to jump up that 6 feet to go after him.
And a lot of bears seem to recognize that. They're like, oh yeah, that dude in the jacuzzi below me, he's a lot bigger, more dominant than me, but he can't really get to me very quickly if I'm on top of the falls. Maybe 903 it's just I wonder if he's trying to go to the far pool and he's not. He doesn't want to provoke 164's ire. I some Sometimes I wonder if bears really do have like a theory of mind, and that's only been demonstrated in a few animals. But it seems like bears, they look at another bear, they recognize that other bear's status, and it's almost like they understand maybe the implications of interacting with that bear. Like that bear might do this if I do that.
Well, that's the kind of algebra that all competitive mammals have to take. It's like watching the high school lunchroom, who's in what clique and where, and we determine fairly quickly where we fit into that niche. I'm sure that the bears, to slightly anthropomorphize, behave in similar ways in the structure of what they do. Although it looks like the fishing's bad enough that they're dispersing to try to find other opportunities.
Yeah, there's still a bear way up on the hill by the big spruce on the far side, moving downriver. I wonder if that's 801. He just kind of moved up there slowly. Yeah, 903 headed down to the riffles. 164, Bucky, still in the jacuzzi. And, he's dominant enough now that he can just sort of hang out there and not really have to worry about too many other competitors. He has the whole falls to himself. We can see there, Troy, but we did have an audience question coming in from Kelly. And I think this is maybe a good opportunity to talk about this because the activity is kind of settled down. But Kelly was wondering how many bears can live in this area comfortably. I'm assuming that not all years are plentiful like last year? Is there a maximum limit of bears per square acre? And Troy, we can think of on the micro scale to try to answer this question. Like it can depend on like the number of fish in the river that day. And then we can also
Mhm.
think about like the larger landscape as well and the population dynamics and the food resources that are available to bears more broadly.
Well, when we look at that kind of macro scale, the depending on where the bears are at, coastal Alaskan brown bears tend to have a smaller range that they travel because the food is so abundant. And as I mentioned earlier, that is a crisscrossing range. It's not like humans where we put a fence around and say no trespassing. Bears are always trespassing in and across each other's ranges where they're hunting for whatever resources are available. But the less food there is, the brown bears that are in the Canadian Arctic, for example, can range over about 3,000 square miles looking for much more scarce resources. And that overlapping territory, unless they run into each other, which here the odds are very high because they're all coming to the river for those resources. But in those other places, there's less chance of that. So I used the term easy earlier, a state of uneasy detente, where we're looking at each other and saying, okay, I'm armed, you're armed. Let's, kind of have this agreement that we're not going to use our arms against each other in this neutral space, but that will not stop the competition if something, if they're both going after the same fish or they both want to hang out in the jacuzzi or on the lip or whatever territory they have temporarily claimed as their own that they're willing to defend for that moment. It's a complicated question to answer because the geography and food resources will help define the number of bears that can be supported in any individual space as well as their individual tolerances. We're only seeing males today, but when we add the females in, especially those who have cubs, then those territorial bubbles will change and become a little more dynamic. As you mentioned earlier, Mike, that split focus they have to have defending cubs as well as defending themselves and trying to catch fish. So the the algebra of it that's going on in their brains has to be profoundly complex to make those determinations. So I don't have a good solid answer for your question other than response to circumstance, food availability, um, and characteristics of the geography where they're at.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if the river's packed full of fish and it stays consistently packed full of fish, then this area can support, you know, easily more than 100 bears. But if fish are scarce during the summer, then bears are going to look for opportunities elsewhere. So it really can vary almost like on a daily basis, depending on how much food is available specifically right here. And then it varies less so over time across the landscape because those things tend to average out. You look at, the farther and farther out you look across the landscape, the averages are less extreme than they would be like on a day-to-day basis at Brooks River. You're looking at an entire watershed um, in comparison. So, yeah. So Kelly, yeah, it's an interesting question, but easily, I think maybe just to think about the statistics of bears that have been identified at Brooks River on average over the last like 25 years or so, about 80 individual bears throughout the whole entire summer. Sometimes it's less, like one year there was only 40 bears, and some years it's like closer to 115, but about 80 during the entire summer. But that's a lot, Troy. I mean, the river corridor, you know pretty well right now, being living out there, it's a small space. So that's a
It's
lot of
short, yeah.
bears.
Yeah, I mean it's roughly a mile and a half from where it starts in Brooks Lake before it ends up down in Naknek Lake, and it's very kind of twisty. If you look at it straight down, it doesn't seem that far, and the ride from the bridge up to Brooks Lake, where you're right by where it starts, is shorter than the river is itself in terms of its total distance. So it's surprisingly short as rivers go.
let's check out the riffles right now because we're getting a better look at 903. So he abandoned the falls temporarily, went down to the exact same spot that 138 was at the beginning of the program, which I don't think is a coincidence because he, knows that this is perhaps a fishing spot that he could utilize. And a better look at him, blonder ears. He kind of has a bald face right now too, especially like right between his eyes. So those are a couple of the field marks that I'm using to identify him. One of his early nicknames happened to be Cheeks, and I wonder if that's because of like sort of like those dark cheek patches he has. I'm not sure. I'd have to ask the bear
Mhm.
monitor at Katmai National Park who identifies the bears and assigns them numbers, whether that is the case. But I can see that pretty well in this light, Troy. That's maybe one of those features that would be more difficult to see under more flat light.
Yeah. Yeah, and since I'm new here, I don't have that kind of history to tell, but that is definitely a distinctive characteristic. The other day I saw three female bears with cubs in the same day, and two of them had triplets. And I took photos of these bears, and I'm looking at it going, are these the same female bears with triplets? And I had to take pictures that I had shot and stack them one on top of the other to start telling the difference between these three bears. And I realized that no, I had indeed seen three different, very blonde female bears. This being one of them that was on our walk in from work. There were four of us rangers who were walking in at the same time, and I had to pull one of them up because he wasn't paying attention very well, and we walked right up on these guys. And those cubs of year, those kois, are very, very attentive and quite adorable. I got some pretty good stills of them a little later with them standing up on their hind legs watching us. These bears are in an interesting position because we're on one side of this Y, and there's a group of visitors on the other side of the Y that goes towards the bridge, and they're trying to figure out where to go. Eventually, we as a group stepped off into the forest to try and give them the road up towards the falls trail. But in the end, they decided that they didn't want to be near any of us humans. And so they went down the other road that goes down toward the beaver pond. And it's really interesting to watch their behavior and how they act in response to humans. In that same day, I saw another of the triplets, and this mother bear had sent her triplets up the tree to try and avoid things because coming down the road, one of our maintenance guys was in a gator, which is one of our, kind of short transport items. And that surprised this mother, and she sent the bears up the tree. And then we end up with a bear jam. I had a whole group of folks that were on the road heading down towards the falls trail, and I gathered them up, and we collectively walked up to the Y. There's a Y intersection here that splits off either to the Valley of 10,000 Smokes Road or goes up to Brooks Lake. And again, there were enough of us there that this mother bear was in no big hurry to move. And we eventually all got ourselves moved out of the way. And she and her cubs came down the tree and went down towards the falls. And then I sent that group with another ranger following behind them and kind of relatively, as safe as any of us are in bear country, about 50 yards behind that bear. So it's interesting the things that we see when we're off and away from the cameras. And it's easy and quick for those of us who live here to take that for granted and forget that our bear viewing audience online doesn't get to see those things. I'm interested in that snorkeling behavior that we're seeing. Which bear was this again? This is Cheeks. I don't know the number.
Yeah, 903. You'll also in the
903.
comments, yeah, you'll see him referred to as Gully or Gulliver, which I do
Mm-hmm.
think is kind of a good nickname for this bear because he, as a younger bear, had learned to hunt gulls, and it was a really kind of
Oh,
special circumstance when he did it. Uh, but it was like 2020. It was like a big salmon year in the river, and he was just catching birds. And so people ask that question a lot, like, are they gonna do they eat the gulls or do they ignore them? Most of the time they don't pay attention to the gulls, but this bear did not ignore them. And yeah, he got a nickname that has stuck among a lot of the bear cam viewers as Gully or Gulliver. And I think that's a good nickname because it reminds us of that story of him when he was a younger bear making a living in a different way.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting because if when you're on the river and the seagulls come and they hang out on the trees or the rocks, they're hoping for and looking for leftovers from the bears. And so it's a smart move on the part of this bear to say, "Oh, they're otherwise distracted," and chomp. Protein's protein. A bear's not fussy about his protein source.
Yeah, I think maybe the reason why they don't go after birds more often is because the birds are quick, and then
Hmm.
they're smaller. They don't have as much uh, digestible energy as a fish,
Yeah.
and also like they're covered in feathers. And a bear can swallow a lot of stuff. Like they eat like the entire fish, even like the mandibles, the gill plates. I mean, things that we could
Mhm.
never imagine getting down our throat without pureeing in a blender. But the
Yeah.
feathers, I think
But
even like the
none of us
that
want
might
to
be
eat a
a
pillow. None of
right.
us want to eat a pillow. This, he, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
our producer
that's some
Brian,
great
yeah,
stuff.
found that clip of 903 from 2020. It's just like a GIF that we have of him charging into the water at a flock of gulls, not going after salmon, but he did this several times. And he would pick up a gull. And it was like such a special circumstance. Like you had these big flocks of gulls. They were in there picking up salmon scraps and especially salmon eggs. And I think this is like September, late September, early October, something like that. And they're so used to the bears ignoring them, they got habituated to the bears. And Troy, that was the bear recognizing, hey, what are these gulls doing? They're not paying attention to me. Okay, I guess I'm going to eat one of them. And we can get comfortable around bears like at Brooks River. You'd be like, oh yeah, I ran
Oh,
into like Gully, 4 times yesterday, and he didn't seem to ignore me. But I like to remind myself each time I encounter a bear, that's a unique situation. And even if that bear was cool with me before, that doesn't mean it could be cool with me if I react the wrong way this time.
yeah, my first solo encounter with a bear, I was riding a bicycle up a hill, and the hills aren't steep, but I'm an older kind of chubby guy, and so I was a little out of shape. It was one of my first rides up, and I get to this Y that's a flat space, and I spin just a couple of circles around that Y to catch my breath, and I'm looking down. And I start to go up the hill, and just as I'm about to drive up into the hill, there's this very large male bear walking right down the hill towards me. And I was stunned, stopped, got off the bike, dragged things off the road, and I'm like, oh, I hope I've done enough. And, once I was no longer coming at him, he was not interested in me. But it was that kind of terrifying moment. And every time I'm riding the bicycles either up or down or around, I'm looking at these curves going, there could be a bear around that curve. I better slow down because that
Yes,
that
that's
put the fear of that reality into me because people said, oh, I don't like to ride the bicycle because I might run into a bear on the road. Well, they're right. It's a risk.
yeah. And when I was a ranger at Brooks River, I had a bicycle there too. And I like to ride out the Valley of 10,000 Smokes Road. And I did it a lot slower. Like in Maine, where I live
Mhm.
now, if I want to bomb down a hill, I'm bombing down a hill. Like there's black bears in
Oh
the
yeah.
area, but the risk of me actually like getting in a close encounter with a black bear here on a road is pretty nil, even though I see them occasionally. But it's much greater at Brooks River, so I never would bomb down a hill um, at Katmai just for safety reasons because I wanted to respect the
Yeah.
bears. I know what they're capable of. I know how powerful they are. Just watching them move through the
Mhm.
river, Troy. And let's go up to
Oh,
Brooks Falls again. Looking at uh, 164 there in the jacuzzi still. He he's strong. I mean, he can sit and stand in a spot that a lot of us would have to work pretty hard to maintain our place.
Yeah. When Sarah walked across the river to get us those measurements that we did back on 6th, 7th of June, she's 5'3", 5'4", and fit, strong, and watching her on video that I shot of that, she's using those poles to maintain her balance. And she was nowhere near the jacuzzi where that current is that much stronger. I walked out into the river way further downstream at the lip of the or at the mouth of the river the other day to clean the underwater camera off, and I was surprised at how much current there is even there. And I'm, 6'3" and 280 pounds. There's a whole lot more mass to me in strength than there is with Sarah in terms of standing up to that. And I remember thinking in that moment, that's impressive that those bears just hang out there as though it's nothing.
It really is. And it's not only their body mass, but it's their strength, it's their genetic adaptations that they have, such as their claws, big feet. So they're kind of always locked in the four-wheel drive. But yeah, when you walk through water, it's difficult for a human, and the bears make it look so much easier.
And that water's cold. It's not bears, so I didn't get wet. But as soon as I stepped foot into the river, I felt the temperature of my legs drop by probably 5, 6 degrees. Super quick. And I also had that thought about these bears just hanging out. I mean, he's been hanging out in that jacuzzi for 15 minutes now, and he seems unconcerned. So that tells you how well they are adapted, both with their fat layers and their fur, to be able to do well with this. And their fur gets wet. I've watched them come out of the river and they're just shaking themselves off like a dog, and there's a whole lot of water that's being thrown off. I know they have a relatively waterproof undercoat, but even at that, the guard hairs on the top get that water in them quite easily. You can see just looking where the water's running how pulled down the fur is by the amount of water that's there.
Yeah, they're soaked to the skin when they're sitting here. It's not like an otter or a beaver where
Hmm.
their fur is so dense, so many hairs
Yep.
per square centimeter that they always have air trapped between their skin and the water. And bears aren't like that. Bears are soaked to the skin. So they must have some other physiological adaptations that allow them to maintain their body temperature in water. And even young bears too that are don't weigh much more than me. They're more comfortable in the water
Hmm.
than I am, and I would be quite hypothermic sitting in the
Yeah, I
water for
watched.
this period of time. I mean, he came in, he got into the jacuzzi what, like maybe 10 minutes into our program. He's been sitting there for a half hour. There's no way I could do that.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the Cubs can do it. I watched a sow and cub a year swim across the mouth from the spit across to campsite the other evening, and just got out and shook himself off and looked at mom and said, "What's next?" And same thing. I was thinking that water's cold.
I think we had a power outage for our lower river cameras, so River Watch and Cat's Riverview for a
Yeah.
while. A lot of times, if the cameras like just disappear, those cameras
Hmm.
are on the tied to the power grid at Brooks River, and if they
Yeah.
have to do some
We
electrical work or something just fizzles, then
we
then those
had a
cameras will
total
go
power
down.
outage. Yeah, we have a total power outage. The reason you didn't lose me is because I've got my Starlink that I'm using attached to a backup battery that kept us going because we've had two power outages today, and so I pulled it out and said, "Nope, we're not going to disappear during this program." So, note to self: always plug the Starlink into the backup battery when doing programs.
I'm glad
All
you
of
were
our
thinking
power here
forward.
All of our power here is provided by generators, and we have generators campsite, and we have generators over on the Vera side as well. And we have, a couple of people who manage those processes. And some days we have power uninterrupted, and other days, like today, we've had three power outages now. So it does get interesting in those moments. We're talking about making sure that we have battery backups on our Starlinks in the two locations that we're doing live broadcasts from here at Brooks Camp to try and make sure that we don't have those interruptions.
And the
It's
reason I
nice that the
mentioned,
ones at the falls are now solar paneled. Go to provide power. Go ahead, Mike.
yeah, the reason I brought that up is because we do have those cameras back. And let's go to Riverwatch because we have a bear grazing there, and there's a
Ah,
cub on the far bank as well. And I'm
yep, I see
the
it.
the bear in the foreground, I do not think is the mother of that cub. They're too far away. This is one of those instances where the camera foreshortens the distance between them. So the mother, I think, of that cub is probably fishing somewhere else. But the lower river cameras, Riverwatch or Cat's Riverview, it's those are the best cameras right now to be looking for these family groups. Oh, and then on Cat's Riverview, so that cub disappeared out of sight. Maybe we'll try to come back to them. But yeah, Cat's Riverview, we have another bear moving away. So that one's going to disappear as well. So things are really getting busy. Oh, now, sorry to jump around, everybody. Let's go back to Riverwatch because we're getting a look at that mom with her cub. Okay, and that looks like could be number 909. Very blonde ears, wide set ears. Uh, Cub right at her right hind leg there. It looks like. Troy, have you had the
Yeah,
opportunity to spend a lot of time hanging out at the bridge and just scanning the area? It's really one of my favorite places to be at Brooks River.
it's been getting a lot more action lately. When I got here 3 weeks ago, then mostly what we were seeing was birds, lots of mergansers. And it's been fun to hang out and watch as more bears are coming out, especially the family groups. A lot of them will come walking around the lake onto the spit. Oh, there we go. She's got two cubs. And hang out there by that very large boat, the queue that is currently hanging out until the lake levels get high enough so we can send it back in to do some restocking. And I often start my day when I ride down there. I will go out onto the spit and look for fresh bear tracks in the sand there. We usually see a lot of those. So it's a good indication of how much activity happens overnight when we're not paying attention. So I'm seeing behind these bears occasionally a flash of a human who has just realized that there's a bear very close to them. Our bear management team does a lot of work to try and keep bears and humans apart from each other because sadly we as humans think, oh wow, that's a bear, that's really cool. And too many of us have the assumption that because we're in a place called a park that it's a zoo, and that is not the case. These are wild animals. And our you know a big shout out to our bear managing team that help to keep the bears a little less comfortable around humans and keep humans from falling prey to some of their worst mistakes.
This is the most vulnerable time of year for young cubs, and it looks like maybe 909 here in our family are moving away because this other bear in the foreground could be number 230. He's an adult male, blonde ears. I can't remember if he's really ever shown aggression towards mothers and cubs, but mothers, they often, recognize, hey, that's another bear. I don't want to take the
Mhm.
risk. Again, they're doing the math in their head. They're doing, as you said, Troy, earlier, they're doing the algebra. There's like, hey, what's the reward here? The possible reward. What's the risk? And how am I going to balance those two things? So she does seem, and the river where these bears are separated from, maybe 30 yards or so. She's keenly
Mhm.
aware of him and being very focused on his approach and just making sure that he doesn't do anything that would cause her to have to defend her cubs or send her cubs up a tree.
Yeah. And she sat down right by a fairly tall dead spruce. She could easily send those cubs up to protect them. I think that's why she's positioned herself there.
Yeah, it is a spot of safety since she can observe that bear right in front of her really clearly. In 909, she's an experienced mom. she's had, I think, 3 litters. Last year she actually came back and she had a litter like in very early June or something, and those cubs disappeared. We don't know why, but she lost her cubs, went back into estrus, mated. Now she's here with cubs again this summer, and she successfully weaned um, a bear who we now call number 609 a few years ago. So she knows how it's done. She is a bear that sometimes takes cubs to the falls too. So we may see that in the future. But a lot of times, Troy, when we see these mothers with the first year cubs come to the river first couple of the last week of June, early July, those families are pretty skittish until they kind of get used to the situation again.
Yeah, she looks relaxed, but she is on guard. Oh, and something else got her attention. Whatever it was that she's willing to turn her back to that one.
Yeah, something certainly caught our attention. Maybe it was a noise a cub made. Maybe she heard something in the brush. We don't have live audio on our Riverwatch or Cat's Riverview cameras just because there's too many people in that vicinity. Basically, what you'd be hearing is airplanes and human conversations. It's not a really that great of a soundscape a lot of the time. So it's on an audio loop. Um, so it's harder to tell what the bears are reacting to if there is noise there. And it looks like maybe
There
one or
is.
both of the cubs are starting to kind of climb up one of those
Yeah,
trees. It's possible that 909 alerted those cubs and kind of gave them a little
yeah,
huff and said, "Yeah, do that," or they could just be doing that because they're a little weirded out.
yeah. There's one up the tree and one still on the ground. I saw the one. Oh, we've got one on a tree to the right. They're going up separate trees.
Cubs are great at climbing. Brown bear cubs, black bear cubs, probably even polar bear cubs too, if they lived in a place
If
where
they had a
they're
tree to climb.
yeah, if they had a tree to climb. Uh, but yeah, I, don't be surprised if you see brown bears climb trees. Brown and grizzly bears can certainly climb trees. They're best at it when they're very young like this, because I think like their proportion of their body mass to like the grip they can get with their claws is allows them to climb trees easier compared to when they're an adult. But sometimes even full grown adults can climb trees. I wouldn't say like a bear like Chunk, for instance, can climb a tree.
Yeah,
One of those 1,000 pound bears, but they can certainly still run a lot faster than you.
yeah,
And the young adults certainly can still climb trees. Yawn there from 909. She's watching maybe number 230 move away, keeping her cub safe. But yeah, Troy, being quite vigilant, also looking for an opportunity to catch a fish.
yeah. The cubs are going back up the tree, so something else is concerning them. Oh, they're both up the same tree now, so that's interesting. It was interesting because I've only ever seen same litter cubs climb the same tree, but I haven't spent a lot of time in bear country like this. So to me, it was interesting that they were climbing separate trees, and I wonder if one of them was going, "Hey, what are you doing over there?"
That's I think that's true. Like they do seem siblings seem to prefer climbing the same tree, and I wonder if that's an instinct for safety too. Like mom, if you're
Mhm.
in the same tree, mom can defend you all at the same time. If you're in different
Yep.
trees, especially if there's widely separated, the mom can't do that. We've seen situations at Brooks River where a mother bear has 2 or 3 cubs, and one of them is too far away for her to defend while she's trying to keep her other cubs safe.
Hmm.
So if they're in the same tree, yeah, that would make a lot of sense. I think from an adaptation standpoint, being in the same tree over the long term, maybe that's just something that got worked into their genes. You want to be close to your sibling, you want to be close to mom. Best way to do that is to be in the same tree. We have about
Still,
5 minutes left in the program, and we'll stick with 909 here for just a bit. I mean, it's we'll see. Sometimes she might just dive right into the water if she happens to see a salmon jumping below her. Um, But Troy, there was a situation. I think you were able to at least see the clip. I don't know if you were able to see it live, but this does have something to do with 909 when she was chasing a salmon, a school of salmon in the water. And Bear 230, the bear that we think was in frame just a few moments ago, was there as well. Maybe this is a good opportunity to look at that. We're going to start the clip here with 909 kind of right in the middle of the screen. So I'll use my pointer to sort of circle around her. Whoops, I need to refresh. So it works. So she's right here. She's got a cub here. She's got a cub in the tree. Looks like as well. Her attention is grabbed by something. So she starts running down river. Since she moved away first, it doesn't look like the cubs, precipitated this. But the cubs are very alarmed in this situation. Troy, they're like, "Where are you going, Mom? You're our protector, our guardian, our source of food, everything." She gets into the water, and she starts chasing fish, and that eventually ends up catching the attention of another bear. And as they come together, Troy, we'll see that they're not buddies in this situation.
It is amazing how quickly they move. Our intellectually hearing that they run 35 miles an hour is one thing compared to actually watching it happen, especially through the water. Oh, here we go. Competition for resources.
Yeah, this sometimes happen. Like bears start chasing fish in the water. The fish move downstream, path of least resistance, and sometimes bears get too close together in these situations. And I don't think 909 here, she's the one who's really being the aggressor. I don't think she thought 230 was too close to her cubs, but she's mauling them. I think he just got up in her space. She's hungry. She's hangry. Her fat reserves are probably pretty low. She has two hungry cubs to deal with. And he got the
Yeah.
message and he's just decided, I'm going to stay here. Maybe that memory factored into what we saw earlier where he didn't attempt to, approach that family.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine that they have, especially with as many bears are in this space consistently, they would know and recognize the personalities and behaviors of the individual bears. And, we know who we don't want to hang out with, and I'm sure they have that same reaction.
Yes, absolutely. 909 at the end of this does get a fish. So that's a good at least 4,000 calories for her. 230 actually gets a fish as well. So they can enjoy that, or they were able to enjoy that. So that was from June 30th. Again, the salmon, movement through the river so far has been kind of light, but we can expect that to pick up. I think it's like the numbers today are pretty on track for what is expected for like the entire watershed. So the larger Naknek River watershed. So more than 260,000 fish. And we could expect to see a big pulse of salmon moving into the river really any moment. It may not happen, could happen, 10 minutes from now. But it'll be fun to watch for, and how the landscape and the behavior of the bears changes every day. Troy, that's something that keeps me watching. So thanks for taking the time out of your day to join us and offer your perspective. I enjoyed having you along.
It was my pleasure. It's looking forward to having more chats about all the awesome things that we're seeing on cameras because it's only going to get more action packed. Just like a good Super Bowl, it'll be the Super Bowl of fish catching.
Absolutely. We have more live programs lined up for you next week, starting on Monday with a live Q&A with Rangers and myself. Join us then on the Brooks live chat channel on explore.org. My name is Mike Fitz with explore.org. I was joined by Troy Hunt, park ranger at Katmai National Park. Until we talk to you again, enjoy the Bears.